Hello, I'm Leslie Ann Knight and welcome to this Just Talking Musicals close-up on two of musical theatre's pre-eminent dressers, the West End's Davina Elliott and Broadway's Ken Brown. Just Talking Musicals with you. In 2011, Eric Pittenberg in the New York Times wrote, "Essential for any good dresser, a lightning-quick skill and James Bond-like stealth." To me, that's the perfect job description for a role that without doubt requires a quick mind, nimble fingers, endless discretion, and appears to attract individuals with a boundless supply of modesty. First up today is the wonderful Davina Elliott, who has dressed on over 100 shows spanning the brightest and best musicals to grace the West End in the last 40 years. From one of my all-time favourites, Guys and Dolls at the National in the early 1980s, to Me and My Girl at the Adelphi, Into the Woods at the Phoenix, The King and I, The Sound of Music, Radio Times, Oklahoma at the Lyceum starring Hugh Jackman, The Pajama Game, Follies, Thoroughly Modern Millie, Wicked, Shrek and City of Angels with Rosalie Craig and Hadley Fraser.
That's the thing I wanted to talk to you about. It was the thing that Ken Brown was talking to me about, tracks. So that when you're working your job and you're everything to do with dressing, that it's much more complicated than people imagine, isn't it?
It does depend on the show. I think Americans work slightly different on Broadway than we do, with their tracks and stuff. Some shows I always carry my notes with me for about the first 2 weeks of a run, because if it's complicated, I just can't take it all in. But there are occasions where you can't look at your notes because you just don't have the time, and then you have to memorize those ones. You think, right, this, the other. You do work out a choreography for your changes, and you do have to be in certain times in certain places. Some wardrobe people like to work out a plot for all their dresses, and they tell them where to go. I don't really like that very much, because it wasn't how I started. I started very much that you were given your actors and you worked it out, and the wardrobe people didn't have anything to do with it. Now they're much more about everybody should bond together. I don't think I'm very good at bonding together. I'm a bit of a maverick. I'm like, I do my own thing, thank you, this is how I work. And people are quite tolerant of me now. They're kind of used to me, and they know that I'll do it. So
you've got to be massively organised, and in the same way as an actor has to learn their lines, you need to know everything about every detail of everything has got to be there, hasn't it? At a certain time.
Yeah, I mean, the working out of the plot. I think the most complicated plot I've ever done was not actually a musical, which was Dr. Faustus, and it was like a jigsaw. I mean, you literally had to take little pieces and put them where, because there was only two of us, and it was incredibly complicated. And I actually ended up running from change to change because I didn't have time. There was no way you could read your notes on that. So I had my notes stuck in various different places because I didn't have time to get them out of my pouch and read them. So I just have little reminders. And that, I think, was the most complicated. I don't think I slept for about a week during the take of that because I was so worried about it. But I mean, with a normal show that's not like that one, you do learn your breaks, and you do learn when you can look at things. But you do pick it up quite quickly because you're doing it every night.
Yes.
But I have done shows where I have had to literally stick them up because I don't have time to get them out of my pouch, look at them, put them back. So you just stick the post-it notes somewhere helpful that just reminds you of where you have to go next.
What's the biggest kind of drama you've had backstage in regards to trying to get everything together and suddenly something doesn't look like it's coming together?
Well, the biggest drama is probably zips breaking is usually the worst thing. I did have to send somebody on once with her zip broken, and I just went, "Don't turn around." She's like, "I've got to do a dance routine." I'm like, "Well, do it quickly with your back to the audience." I mean, the poor girl. She had this huge straight dance routine, and she had to do the whole thing with her bra and her mic pack showing.
Oh.
And I just felt, but there was, in circumstances like that, you actually can't do any. It was so quick, there was no time to safety pin her, which is what you'd normally do, is shove safety pins in. But things like that. There was one on the musical Gene Seberg at the National Theatre where there were all these monks' robes forever, and they changed it during previews, they changed it so we had more monks' robes, and suddenly all these monks' robes came off at us, and we had to reset monks' robes for the end, and none of us had time to work out whose monk's robe belonged to who. And that was an absolute disastrous night because we threw monks' robes on the wrong people for the wrong time, and everybody looked really, really stupid, and they had to employ a monk robe dresser just to come in and sort out monk robes.
That's not surprising because everybody's different shapes and sizes, aren't they? So that must have been hysterical.
It was.
Of course, in out of your many shows that you've worked on, I really wanted you to mention Oklahoma.
Yes, the wonderful Hugh Jackman.
Yes.
Yes. To which people still go, you dressed Hugh Jackman, and what was he like? As if he's some, amazing god, which of course he's amazing. But he's the most normal. Well, I am talking Oklahoma. I haven't met him I saw him a few years back, but not for a while. He's the most normal, lovely, family orientated man. I had a birthday party while I was dressing him, and I held it at my mother's house, which was not very far from where he was staying. And I said jokingly, if you want to pop round to my birthday party garden. And he went, oh, I've got friends round. I think, he's just being nice. Birthday party, doorbell rings. He said, my friend's cancelled. Is it still okay if we come? He and his wife. They're sitting in my mother's garden.
Isn't that lovely?
He's that kind of person. He was just wonderful. I mean, the whole production was amazing. But when he started doing that number at the beginning,
oh, what a beautiful morning.
Yes, he just started, and you just get shivers because he was amazing.
Yes.
And just so gorgeous. I mean, he was never cross or fed up, or he was the most lovely company man. He always used to go around and say hello to everybody. He was just extraordinary.
On the other side of the Atlantic, Ken Brown has worked as an integral member of countless backstage teams on Broadway. Aside from touring with the Joffrey Ballet and working with New York City Opera, the Met, the New York City Ballet and the Royal Shakespeare Company, he has worked on 20 musicals on Broadway, including the original production of La Cage aux Folles, Gypsy with Tyne Daly, Guys and Dolls, Passion, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, The Producers, The Addams Family, and Hello Dolly with Bette Midler. He's done the entire run of 12 plays and worked in 20 different New York City theatres, including 11 years at the St. James Theatre doing 4 different shows. In his own words, he's had the pleasure of dressing, amongst others, Terence Mann, Whoopi Goldberg and Rupert Everett, and since 1992 he's been the personal dresser to none other than multi-award-winning actor Nathan Lane, who was described by the New York Times in 2010 as the greatest stage entertainer of the decade.
I'm going off track here, but we're allowed to. I know my magic nights in the theatre that I've had when I've been to the theatre. I can remember those. They just stand out. And I've got to ask you, for goodness sake, you must have about, I don't know how many memories that are absolute magic, and they always will be, and standout moments for you.
Yes, several the 2 that I think of right away are from very early on. One is, of course, Gypsy. There is when Louise does the strip changes. Tyne Daly is such a detailed, amazing professional that the show was structured so that when she does the first strip, and I'm assuming you know the show well, when she does the first strip, Mama Rose says, give him a glove. And Tyne had that structured so that as that was happening on stage, she was in a quick change booth that was built upstage with a microphone, and she was getting out of the costume, out of the old wig, and then she would walk behind the set with a stage manager with a flashlight, and I'm following her with the dress. She'd go back up to her dressing room, up a flight of stairs to the dressing room, sit down at the makeup table while the other 2 strip changes are happening. She would do a completely different makeup, put on a different wig, a different dress, and paint her nails.
Never.
Now just think of the focus that took. Paint her nails, come back down to deck, and look at the pearls in the jewelry box on the set, to put her in a sense memory place and then go out and do the scene in the dressing room where she confronts her daughter. But the feeling that I got walking behind her with the flashlights and the backstage and the wig cap to go do all of that detail work and come back on, that always felt like magic to me. That was magic. And there was another moment in Legs Diamond where I had a very, very complicated change. And it was kind of just off the set. It was two gangsters out of suits into other suits. And as they were doing the change and you had to get all of the pieces right, there were lights hidden in the floor that revolved up and it changed. And that always felt like magic too, because you were focused on what you were doing in between what they had seen them in before, what they were going to see them in next. And as you were in that tiny space, the lighting was changing, the sets were moving, and they were becoming something else. Those both always felt like magic every time I did them.
How do you do that? Do you have to have lots of lists?
Lots
or do you
of
learn it physically.
What they do in Broadway is you have to know it physically and you have to know it by heart.
Yeah.
As you develop it, as you start on a show, you walk around behind the people and you write pages and pages of notes. Then you go home and you read them to yourself. You try to boil them down. You try to remember segments of things that happen. The hardest shows where there's a very, very long segment when there's no time to read. The most difficult thing is learning the timing, when you can breathe, when you have to have it in your hands right away. So learning the timing and having it in your head, but both of those, there was no time to look at anything. You just had to be present and doing it and look like you knew what you were doing. So you know it as well as the actor knows the words and the songs.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was it like working on the Cage aux Folles? And what was it like when that opened?
I came in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
I wasn't there at the opening. They had it was a very difficult show, and when you start on Broadway and you don't go right into a job, you swing where you learn somebody's track and you do that for a while, and all the tracks are written separately and you learn all of the different things, and then in your mind you start putting together how all of the things interact. So sometimes you might be on stage left in the upstage booth. Sometimes there was a fly gallery in La Cage that all of the coats went up to. That was another thing that always felt like magic. You had to take an elevator up to the fourth floor, that Sarah Bernhardt elevator, and then you walked out on a catwalk, and when the coats flew up into the air, you took them off the rings and the hooks and carried them back and took them in the elevator and took them down. I think I've lost your question now. So La Cage, it was learning, and La Cage was so hard, the first one, because they made such an effort, and in subsequent productions this has disappeared, such an effort that you couldn't tell what gender anybody was. So when you're learning the changes, somebody comes to you and they're a redheaded woman. Then the same person comes at you and they're a blonde man. And then the same person comes at you and they're a brunette woman. And they were all completely different people seeing them, and yet you had to recognize who you were going to help with something fast to go back on. And there was the three very fast changes in a row, the tuxedo, the birds, and the can-can. So you had to think how far ahead, again, about timing. You couldn't just concentrate on what you were doing at the moment. You had to be ready to do the next change and the next change and know where they were. So it was complex, but it was so magical and so much money and so glamorous and so different.
Yeah.
And such a good show and great music. And they really knew they were going out on a limb when they did it the first time. And my parents loved it. It's a love story, and that's why it works. And it's survived lots of different productions, but it was a terrific first way to get your feet wet. I learned 6 different tracks on that show and repaired beadwork in the afternoons.
Well, there you are. Having met them both, I can see how the dresser is such a vital linchpin in the smooth running of any show, and how essential it is to have their skills at the centre of any successful production. A huge thank you to Davina Elliott and Ken Brown for sharing their fascinating insights about life backstage and for shining such an inspirational light on the life of a leading theatrical dresser. I'm Leslie Ann Knight. You can find plenty more stories about musicals here on the Just Talking Musicals channel on YouTube. And if you like us, don't forget to subscribe so we can keep on bringing you the stories. See you soon.
Just talking musicals with you.